Another day, another big breaking news story for Ohio State. Once again, going down to Alabama and taking advantage of the fact that Nick Saban has indeed retired with their third transfer from the Crimson Tide. This time, true freshman five-star quarterback Julian Sayin, the top quarterback in the 2024 class. He's been in Tuscaloosa for like 10 days as an early enrollee, and then obviously decides to enter the transfer portal, and now his destination is at Ohio State. Nathan, that's five quarterbacks in the room. This is kind of crazy, right? You've got five quarterbacks in the room, and three of them are brand new guys.
Yeah, I mean, all this talk about, hey, we'd like to have 4 scholarship quarterbacks. It'd be great to get back to that level. And then now you're just stacking them in a crazy new way. Yeah, just and this is, I think, in a lot of ways, the most extreme example of what we've talked about for years on Buckeye Talk, which is, the Ryan Day quarterback acquisition policy, strategy, however you want to say it, where you're going after elite guys in every class, and they've never had it quite come up like this. The closest thing, I suppose, was when Quinn Ewers reclassified, came in early, and that really didn't have anything to do with football directly. So this is more about football. This is more about a marriage between a coach and his new offensive coordinator and a quarterback that they had coveted for a long time. Someone that, you guys would know this maybe even closer than me. Steven, you covered it, but trying to get Julian Sayin to flip, not being able to do it. That's when they kind of double back and get Aaron Noland as the guy who looks like, certainly not a consolation prize, like the number 4 overall prospect, a 5-star guy, number 4 quarterback, I think, in the composite, and a 5-star guy as the freshman for this class. And then circumstances just opened this door for you to get the guy that you had maybe prioritized first. And I think a lot of things, so you already have sort of a policy in place where you are just bringing in as much talent as possible and the cream rises to the top. And then you have the scrutiny / pressure / whatever you want to call it that is around Ohio State football right now and around Ryan Day right now, a place where 11-2 doesn't cut it. Losing to Michigan, no matter what the context, doesn't cut it. He has to break through that. And I think all those things combined are what made this a move that, as soon as Sayin went in the portal and we looked at it, on one hand, we were like, well, I was almost like, if you're Julian Sayin, is this where you want to go? Because there's so much talent in front of you. But from an Ohio State standpoint, I understand, I guess, what is going on here for Ryan Day, because you can't take another chance at having another year of a lot of ambivalence about your quarterback play. I think that's the other factor here. I think this past season, and just never feeling like it clicked in the right way with Kyle McCord, but then also maybe not knowing that you had a surefire, better thing to go to in the moment, I think reinforced that they couldn't pass up adding a talent like this to this room.
Yeah, so I did cover this, and it's very interesting how this all worked out. Obviously, Dylan Raiola was first. That was the first commitment of the class and who they wanted to build this class around, the 2024 class, the foundation of it. And Dylan Raiola, obviously, he was in the class for about 6 or 7 months there and then decommitted in December of 2022, literally, I think within like 48 hours of Jeremiah Smith, the top player, the top wide receiver in the country, decommitting. Dylan Raiola obviously ended up committing to Georgia before flipping to Nebraska close to signing day as a number 6 player and a number 2 quarterback in that class. You're right, Nathan. The first place they did go was Julian Sayin. They offered him about 3 or 4 weeks after Dylan Raiola decommitted, and then Corey Dennis went out there to see him, the former quarterback's coach at the time, went out to see him. And I remember talking with Julian saying about this. They were trying to make him a Buckeye. And they said to him, we're going to do everything it takes to make you a Buckeye. Well, who would have thought it would take all this? But he's now at Ohio State. But at the time, he wasn't really responsive to any of that. He was so set on, I'm going to Alabama as a California kid to play for Nick Saban. An underrated part of this is Bill O'Brien was the quarterback's coach and offensive coordinator at the time that Julian Sayin actually got offered by Alabama. So it didn't play that much of a role here, I don't think, but it does. It's an added bonus that the guy who offered you now get to play for him, even if it's in a different location. And then obviously after things kind of didn't go anywhere with Julian Sayin. They maybe checked back in with Jaden Davis, but that didn't go anywhere. Mutually, both sides didn't feel like that needed to go anywhere else. And then they settled in on Aaron Nolan, who they'd had a relationship with for a couple of years and had been telling, listen, if some things go left with Dylan Raiola, let's explore this more. And obviously, Aaron Nolan developed into a 5-star quarterback during that time. Andrew, there's 4 players classified as a 5-star quarterback in that 2024 class. 3 of them at one point in their lives were committed to Ohio State, whether it's Dylan Raiola, who was the first one to do it, Aaron Nolan, who committed and signed, and now Julian Sayin as a transfer from Alabama. I don't even know how to classify that yet. Because if he did the early enroll, it might just be a flip. And then there's DJ Lagway, who's at Florida right now. But when you look at how this is shaping out now with Will Howard, Devin Brown, Lincoln Keenholz, Aaron Nolan, and Julian Sayin, both as true freshmen, is this a discussion about what this means for the 2024 Ohio State football roster or what it means for the 2025 and beyond Ohio State football roster?
Well, the most interesting thing that I thought you said was that they told Julian Sayin, we'll do whatever it takes to make you a Buckeye. I want to know who in Columbus got Nick Saban to retire. I want to know what kind of strings Ohio State was pulling to make Nick Saban. Did they get him some new like fancy country club membership for a golf club? I don't know. We'll see. We'll have to investigate that here. But yeah, this to me is not a 2024 conversation really at all, because we had talked, especially Steven and I, we had done a couple of videos and stuff about what does Aaron Nolan mean for the 2024 Ohio State quarterback room. All right. We did that at a time where we thought the trio was going to be Devin Brown, Lincoln Keenholz, Aaron Nolan. And we were like, can Aaron Nolan be the guy? Is Aaron Nolan the second best quarterback? Do you want to make him the backup? Like, we were talking about that, and we didn't really talk about Aaron Nolan super seriously as a starter because we figured Keenholz or Brown would win that job, and at least early in the year. And then you bring in Will Howard, and it's kind of, all right, you know what? Howard's the guy, and then everything else will kind of sort itself out down the line. Well, this doesn't really change anything, I don't think, for 2024. Because Nolan and Sayin, like, unless, I've made this point before, unless something really, really good happens or something really, really bad happens, you're not going to play either Aaron Nolan or Julian Sayin in 2024. Like, unless one of these dudes is just the Trevor Lawrence guy where you show out and you're like, you know what, we got this. Like, we cannot leave him on the bench. This dude is the number 1 overall pick in 3 years. He has to play, unless it's that, or unless it's, oh, good gravy, Will Howard's not cutting it and we don't trust Brown or Keenholz or whoever's here. Like, unless it's that situation, we have to throw in the freshman. Like, you're really not talking about anything in 24. The 25 conversation gets very interesting because Will Howard, Devin Brown, Lincoln Keenholz, Aaron Nolan, Julian Sayin, 4 of those guys can be back in 2025. Now, I would say I would bet a lot of money that at least 1 or 2 of those guys are going to be gone starting maybe at this point next year. 1 or 2 of those guys is gone. You know, it's just a crowded room, and you know, you use some simple math and you look at the clock, and Devin Brown's eligibility, you're running out of it. You're running out of time to be a starter, and now you just brought in another 5-star player. So it's going to come down to 2025, and I think you can start to see it shaping up as what day we were in this, January 21st of 2025. We're doing this podcast and we're saying, what does the quarterback battle between Aaron Nolan and Julian Sayin mean, and what does this look like? So yeah, for 2024, pretty much nothing. Pretty much means nothing. Does nothing good, bad, or indifferent for Ohio State's, I guess it does do something indifferent, for Ohio State's national championship hopes and national championship title hopes. 2025 is a different conversation.
Well, I guess the devil's advocate for 2024 is that at the end of the spring, 2 people leave.
Mm-hmm.
And then, again, we usually don't like to talk specifics about speculating on transfers, but the quarterback situation kind of always forces us to do that. So you would look at, does Devin Brown stay for the fall if he thinks that Will Howard is already in the driver's seat? And does Lincoln Keenholz stay if he thinks there's both? If you're getting that sandwich, right? That sometimes these receivers, we see a lot in this receiver room where you get just pinched in between not being able to break through, and then the guys coming in behind. So now you're down to only 3 scholarship quarterbacks, and do both of those guys make it to 2025? Now you start to spin yourself into where 2025 you arrive, and you've got the guy left standing and a true freshman. And then I guess something else that you find in the portal, I don't know. There are ways that this has repercussions in the quarterback room. It's not because before everything lined up in a very natural order way, I thought. That there would be a competition between Howard and Brown, and even if the resolution of that happened in the spring and somebody left, you still had 3 scholarship quarterbacks, like 3 tiers of quarterbacks for the fall, and then another kind of natural quarterback competition could happen next spring with, at worst, Keen Holtz, Noland, and Tavian St. Clair coming in. And now things are a little bit more up in the air. It's just, you have to do a little more work, I guess, to keep the room together, and I don't blame anyone who this changes enough things for that they decide to go somewhere where it's maybe just a smoother path. Like it's both the right move for Ryan Day, I guess, to be this ruthless and make this addition, and it's also the right move for those guys to say, well, I can't really worry that much about your depth chart at some point. I'm here to play. So that's the one caveat here, is there are going to be repercussions to this, but there's no transfer portal open until the end of the spring. So this is going to be a 5-man quarterback room this spring. And after last spring being such a intense focus on the quarterback room, man, we had no idea. Like, it's going to be a whole other thing this spring once we get to watch these guys throw some balls.
So you touched on an important point right there that I think we should clear up. Like, number one, I've made this point before. It is kind of like that, like, terrifying college class that you hear about where it's like the professor says, look to your left and look to your right. One of these guys won't be here at the end. That's kind of where you're at with quarterback recruiting in college. Not at Ohio State, not in the Big Ten, not at a high level, just in college football, where players are going to transfer because there's one guy who gets to play quarterback. There's not 3 receivers you can trot out there, or 3 corners that you can trot out there, or whatever. So guys want to play, so guys will leave. And to the point about being ruthless, I think that is kind of what you have to do in today's college football. And I'm not saying you weren't making this point. I'm agreeing with you. It's just that I think some people might get it twisted. Like, you got to look at this room and say, you now have 2 5-star quarterbacks in the room, and whatever you think the chances of Air Noland being great were, you just added another guy who's kind of in that same ballpark, in that same category as Air Noland. So, I mean, do you think there are 50-50 chances to work out? A little better than 50-50 chance? Whatever it is, you feel immensely better about the future. And if somebody leaves, somebody leaves. Like, that's the way that you have to approach this if you're a coaching staff and you're a college football program at quarterback in today's college football. I think it's a different conversation a little bit at receiver, because, like, Ohio State could bring in Jeremiah Smith and then the number 2 receiver in the country. And guess what? Both of them can play at the same time. But you can't do that at quarterback. So I think quarterback is the position. Nathan's right. You have to be the most ruthless in your recruiting and who you're bringing in and when you're bringing them in.
I think quarterback is just where that necessary evil stands out the most, because only one guy can play. But this is a clear, if you look at all their transfer portal additions, really, obviously we're talking about the quarterback situation with Will Howard and Julian Sayin, and then adding Aaron Nolan as a signee. But you look at all their transfers so far, and it's very much just get the best possible players you can get and then figure it out later. Understand that there's going to be attrition. Understand that there are going to be people who aren't going to stick around. But that's fine, because the people who are staying are the people you pick to be the starters, because those are the guys who ended up being the best of that collection of talent that you've brought in. And it is, Ryan Day has started to say this when we talked to him about roster management, and it's gone under the radar, but because of the world we live in now with NIL and the transfer portal, I think it hits my ears a little bit differently. He said, he always just talks about, we'll get to 85, we'll figure it out by the time we get to fall camp. We've had our texters 614-350-3315 bring up and ask what the numbers are, what the scholarship numbers are right now. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter until fall camp. As long as you're at that 85 number by fall camp, that is what matters. So don't worry about, how many guys are in this room, or are we over or are we under right now if you're a fan of this team. Just, they're going to add guys. They're going to go add guys where they feel like they need to get better. Even if the option they had last year was pretty decent. They didn't. We talked about this on the recruiting part, Andrew. They didn't need Caleb Downs for their safety room to be good, but it's Caleb Downs. And if that dude wants to come, you can't tell him no. And it's the same thing with Julian Sayin. It's the same thing with Will Howard. And it'll be the same with any other position. So ruthless is one way to put it. I'll just say necessary evil. In this world, you just got to find the best 85 guys. And if that means that the 10 other guys you brought in earlier don't see where they fit in anymore and they leave, you've almost got to live with that at this point, Nathan.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, we used to have this conversation about whether the policy, the way that Ryan Day did it, we had some debates on Buckeye Talk about whether it was the right way to do it. And, you could take some more developmental, lower ranked, in-state guys who maybe were going to be career backups anyway, and take them as like long-term guys to help just like keep the room stable, like every other year, every third year, however you want to do it. And but Ryan Day, like there's definitely programs who do that, and Ryan Day has never done that. And he has always, it's just been one guy like this after another, really. Like Lincoln Keynotes might be like the lowest ranked scholarship quarterback he took. I don't know where Jack Miller was by the time he actually got to Ohio State, but at one point was very highly ranked before he had some injury things. So it's like, this has been the policy all along, and this is just the most extreme example of it. And again, I think the circumstances, both of Saban leaving and the circumstances of the how pivotal of a year people think this is for Ohio State, play into this, because I think this isn't, I think you guys are right that it's probably not. Listen, these guys are 5 stars for a reason. We've talked about 5 stars as quarterbacks, especially, differently over the years. And I'm not going to sit here and say that Julian Sayin couldn't come in. He's going to be learning. I mean, Will Howard's learning this offense for the first time too. Like this is, everybody's kind of brand new. He has the most actual experience in college games, which means something, and he's performed pretty well over the years. Devin Brown has his own level of experience in this system. He actually has some advantage in that regard. But these guys are 5 stars, and I don't think you can't put 0% on the chance that one of these 2 5 stars would emerge as the best option to start on day one, or as with Trevor Lawrence in 2018 with Clemson, that doesn't emerge over the course of a season or by, a month into a season. That I'm very intrigued by how this is all going to play out. But I do think it is a bigger deal, probably, you're right, for 2025. And then in 2025, there is going to have to be a decision somebody has to make. Because on the one hand, you're always one snap away from being the starter at Ohio State, which is significant. And that's a thing that very, very few other programs can offer a job of that caliber. But at some point, you have to make the right decision to have your own career. So, but that's next year's problem. Ryan Day has to be fully consumed with this year's problems, and I think this is further evidence of that. More of an impact for 2025, but also because of just the atmosphere of everything, I think everything is heightened. I think he has been more aggressive than we've ever seen before, and this is just another example of that.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Go ahead.
So I was going to say, we have kind of made this point on Buckeye Talk a couple times. I think Steven's the one that kind of points this out a lot, that you need depth in a 12-team playoff world, right? There's a very real scenario where you play 12 regular season games, you play a Big Ten championship game, there's 13, and then you got to go win 3 playoff games to win a national championship. There's 16 games. And what if you play you have a great regular season, and all of a sudden you lose the Big Ten championship game, and now you got to go on the road in the first round, or you got to host a game? Then it's 17. You got to build up your depth. And I am wondering, to Nathan's point, if time is Ohio State's friend here as we kind of talk about this, because we've mentioned the schedule before. Akron, Western Michigan, bye week. Marshall, at Michigan State, Iowa, at Oregon, bye week. So you have 2 bye weeks in the span of your first 6 games. And then you start really kind of the meat of your schedule where you play Nebraska, at Penn State, Purdue, at Northwestern, Indiana, Michigan. I wonder if, because you have these 2 guys in this room, if there isn't a scenario, and Nathan might have convinced me of that, if there isn't a scenario where maybe not on August 1, they're not the best quarterback, but how do we feel about November 1st? Or I guess whatever day that would be for the Penn State game. Like, how do we feel about that time of year? I think the longevity of the season might give you some time, and especially with another bye week, it might give you some time to say, you know what, maybe eventually one of these dudes could be the starter as we move on kind of throughout the course of the year. I don't hate that thought.
I think this is going to be the most interesting spring game I've been a part of because everyone's going to see single one of these guys take snaps and go, oh, who's better here? Who's better there? Whoa, what does this mean? Whoa, what does that mean? I think this is the 2025 issue as well. But I do think it has a chance next spring, 2025, to be the most intriguing quarterback battle we've seen as well. And that's going back to Cardell Jones and JT Barrett, where that one circumstance created a situation where that was a battle because JT Barrett got hurt. In 2018, that's the closest thing to just a normal situation. But even then, Joe Burrow got hurt and it allowed Dwayne Haskins to build some momentum going into that offseason, especially with that Michigan game. But that was like a back and forth, real deal situation. In 2021, Nathan, I don't think there was ever a time when we didn't think CJ Stroud wasn't going to win that job. Maybe you thought Kyle McCord had a chance, as to your point, 5-star, who knows? But like that was kind of CJ Stroud's job. While even this past year, it felt like it was Kyle McCord's job, and even the way Ryan Day talked about it, I don't know how confident he was in either one of those options at times in terms of the upside ceiling. You were just the best guy from the guys in the room. There's a chance here. You got 2 5-star recruits who are the same age, and it just might make for a real head-to-head, back-to-back back and forth situation where someone's going to end up being the starter here long-term and be like Ohio State's next long-term starting quarterback, and the other one might just go somewhere else and still be successful. And that's why from that standpoint, that's what makes it a 2025 issue that's going to make this really, really interesting if you're just thinking Will Howard's going to have the job this year. And then let's see what happens with Aaron Nolan and Julian Sayin when we get to January of 2025. Get the text 614-350-3315. When this news broke, just like the Caleb Downs news, just like the Bill O'Brien news, just like the athletic director news, just like the Seth McLaughlin news, just like everything else that has happened since Ohio State lost to Michigan on November 25th, that's the first place you're going to get it. 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. And for Nathan Baird and for Andrew Gillis, I'm Stephen Means. And that was a shorter version, but a very, very interesting and emergency version of Buckeye Talk.